Let's talk about happiness. What a great idea, Dave. It's a cold January in the middle of a global pandemic.
Moving more than 10% in terms of life satisfaction would normally be reserved for things such as gaining a job when you were unemployed or finding a partner in life. So for this course to do as well, if not even better, is really rather extraordinary.
Happiness is one of those elusive concepts that we think we know, but no one can really explain it. And yet it's so important that it appears in the first lines of the US Declaration of Independence, as if it could be pursued like a shoplifter. An odd but inspiring thing to be included as a reason to reject colonial rule, I would have thought. And even though the pursuit of happiness is an Enlightenment ideal hundreds of years old, it's remained a fairly abstract concept with a history of meaning a different thing to pretty much everyone. Mostly you know happiness when you don't have it. But in the last decade, a school of thought has developed including positive psychology, neuroscience, and behavioral science that seeks to promote happiness by way of design. The reason it's important isn't because it signals some new fad that everyone will try for a bit and drop sometime the 3rd or 4th week of January each year, but because for the first time, a specific course of action has been empirically proven to help you feel good about life. A part of me really would prefer if we could all just manage to feel good without needing any structure or guidance. I mean, I don't remember needing a guide for happiness when I was 7, but maybe as a kid, we all practiced so much that happiness is just easier. A bit like when staying fit is easier when you're already fit. As we become adults, maybe it's like that happiness muscle gets flabby, and while I'm flogging this metaphor to within an inch of its life, perhaps what we need from time to time is a bit of coaching to get in shape again. But if you live in the more skeptical parts of the world, like I do here in Britain, this stuff can sound like nails down chalkboard to a lot of people. So as much as I admire the people and the course, I don't want to dwell too much on the actual mechanisms that appear to trigger a genuine inner glow. For that, you should check out Action for Happiness with an open mind and a willingness to let go of your inner Grinch. But I will give you a quick impression. At first glance, I found the app and the reminders to exercise or reach out to someone I've not talked to in a while a bit twee. But then I'd like to think of myself as quite independent, and I'm not generally in the kind of vulnerable state that the advice seems to suggest. Each of the reminders also comes with the science of why it's important and what effect it can have. It's designed to cater for a broad range of people, at the risk of appearing perhaps a bit simple. But if you've ever tried mindfulness, yoga, Pilates, meditation, or even just trying to regularly floss your teeth, things that are good for you can sound really simple at first until you try it and realize that it has benefits, but also requires small but consistent effort. There are 10 aspects of the course, and as you might expect, a lot of them appear to be just common sense at first glance. The secret is in the intentionality, that deliberate practice of being happy, just like making sure that you floss your teeth. One economist in Oxford involved with the work went a step further and studied a number of people who had taken the course to find out if it was possible to measure an improvement in life satisfaction other than measurables like heart disease. Sure, you might fool yourself into being happy to reduce strain on your heart, but were you actually having a better life, or was it just some elaborate placebo?
Moving more than 10% in terms of life satisfaction would normally be reserved for things such as gaining a job when you were unemployed or finding a partner in life. So for this course to do as well, if not even better, is really rather extraordinary. What we've been lacking so far is essentially a strong intervention, something that really shows us how to truly raise well-being and do so sustainably in the field with actual people. And that's what makes this study so exciting. Now, the importance of what we've done is, and we've put a lot of effort in getting this right, is to do a randomized controlled trial. That is, we brought people in and then re-randomized this group into a group that started, that became the treatment group, and then the other group was delayed, and we're only starting the course 8 weeks later. What happens to the two groups is obviously where it gets exciting. When they come in for the first time and get measured, we find that they're a perfectly balanced measure of well-being. But the treatment group, they get to start. And what we find in the space of the next 8 weeks, the length of the course, and they meet once a week, is that we find their life satisfaction improving week by week to end with about, over 10% higher in terms of their life satisfaction and other measures as compared to the control group, who were measured at the beginning but do not benefit from the course. Now, as soon as they come back and the treatment group have finished, what you find is they then in turn also see an increase in life satisfaction, and But the exciting thing, of course, is that we, from an academic perspective, is that we see the treatment group has maintained its level of life satisfaction. If anything, has improved slightly even further. But that's not the only thing that we've measured. We've also measured other aspects of happiness and well-being, such as worthwhileness, improving emotional well-being, in addition to life satisfaction. We see decreases in anxiousness. We see decreases in mental health measures relating to depression and anxiety. And we see increases in pro-social habits and attitudes. So we see increases in compassion, in trust, and the notion of gratitude. And so one really important aspect of this course is that it brings people together and gives them a space to kind of open up and discuss what really matters to them. And if we've learned one thing over the past 20 years of the empirical science of well-being, is that ultimately what matters is building social capital, is having social ties and linking to others. This is such a cost-effective way of increasing well-being and building communities, and more people should participate, more investment in this should take place.
The really odd thing about it is that it's taken scientific research to reveal things that we all instinctively know but don't actively do enough of. In short, if we weren't such selfish, inwardly obsessed emotional Scrooges, we'd all be a lot happier. Who knew? Do we really need confirmation that this is the case? Well, back to the coaching metaphor with your flabby, happy muscles. Yes. What interests me is the ambition of the people behind it. What would happen to society if the practice of these 10 aspects were integrated into our working and personal lives en masse? How could that possibly happen, and should it be an aim of society, or should it only be an individual goal? Now, having a serious economist give it all a seal of approval reveals a couple of things. Firstly, that the science is serious and being taken seriously. But secondly, there's something about our need for there to always be an economic case to be heard before something is considered credible. I mean, I'm sure if you really had to, you could make a business case that making people happier would also make them more productive. But I've always been a bit suspicious of anything helpful to living a better life needing to show its market chops first. Business can benefit, and that's not a bad thing, but surely the publicly stated goal of a happier society, if that's what we all decided to pursue, should stand on its own 2 feet. To be fair to Mr. Deneve, he's not making the case that this is good for business per se, but the fact is he's a serious and credible economist, and we tend to be more culturally open to new ideas if economists have also given the green light to them first. I think this is a shame because it puts the cart before the horse. Going back to the US Declaration of Independence, it wasn't life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as long as it doesn't interfere with our economic model. So, yes, it's encouraging that the rigors of economic thinking can be applied to proving that we can make people happier, and okay, because of our cultural bias towards economics, we can feel more confident that the science has real-world effects. But what would a society be like that took the pursuit of happiness seriously once more? Can we make happiness great again? That's not going to date well, is it? What those behind the study and the research would like to see is more government resources and, I presume, a way for the body of work to find its way into policy and the population at large. If you're picturing some sort of government-mandated happy steps that are studiously applied in every organisation by a happiness and wellness officer, you're looking a little too hard for something to worry about. That's not how this would happen. A more likely picture of how the Action for Happiness model could enter the mainstream is like that of the mental health awareness movement, which would have been seen as a load of old codswallop 30 years ago, but is now demonstrated and practiced in classrooms as part of the curriculum here in the UK. Big cultural shifts do happen right under our noses, but they sometimes feel so slow while we're in them that we don't notice them till we look back a few years. It only takes a rewatch of almost any British TV soap from the early 2000s to be reminded that passive smoking was in its last gasp. Who writes this stuff, eh? After hundreds of years of being completely normal, smoking was banned inside pubs, clubs and workplaces anywhere in the UK on the 1st of July 2007. It took decades of cultural change and activism about the health risks, but very suddenly the public reached a tipping point and the acceptance of the ban was almost universally celebrated. Smoking as a habit still stumbles on, but it's not hard to imagine it becoming as niche and odd in a generation as chewing tobacco today. An extension of the mental health awareness movement into something like an Action for Happiness public policy could take the shape of awareness campaigns. Once there is a more public acceptance and valuing of happiness as a public goal, it could start to throw light on the parts of our culture that work against this goal. For instance, it could make it easier to address the serious problems with the way our media is given carte blanche to attract eyeballs by deliberately and forensically using our fears and insecurities. In terms similar to the public health emergency we're experiencing right now, our news media landscape has become a clear and present threat to the pursuit of individual and collective happiness, all in the name of being informed. Selective use of the worst-case scenarios, most harrowing personal stories, and the narrative of a never-ending crisis may be true at any given time, but is it wise for an entire nation to wallow in it day after day? Perhaps in time, with a renewed pursuit of happiness, we could learn to see tabloid newspapers and the BBC's rolling what to worry about next formats as the mental equivalent of passive smoking. Now, an important caveat about all this happy stuff. I've got nothing but respect for the people and the research that is behind the drive for a happier society, but there is an elephant in the room. Being deliberately positive cannot be used as a way to excuse massive system failures. I think we should all be very wary of how mass adoption of a happiness doctrine could easily become a way of blaming individuals for their lack of satisfaction. Telling impoverished kids, for example, that their lack of any breakfast is a good way to practice mindful resilience would of course be repulsive, but these currents of thought often run close together. Sometimes things, like now, are just really a bit shit, and we should reserve the right to say so bluntly. It may be that some things are not only not your fault or responsibility, they need solving through a system change, with all of us doing our bit, rather than personal or symbolic change. There's a big difference. Deciding which is the hard bit. The pursuit of happiness as a measure of a good society is not just admirable, but more needed than ever. I'd like to think that it'll be back in fashion after all this pandemic malarkey is over, but it shouldn't just be down to individuals to miraculously pull the happiness rabbit out of the hat when everything is falling to bits. There's no reason why we can't pursue happiness individually and as part of any larger system change. To be fair, the most inspiring on the list of 10 aspects of happiness is the human need to be part of something bigger than themselves, and that's where the personal, the spiritual, the scientific, and the political all meet in a kind of big mushy goo we call democracy. So with democracy in mind, let me know in the comments your thoughts on whether the public pursuit of happiness should make a comeback, and make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe, because I explore something new every week. And remember, the future is the only place we're all heading at the same time. May as well make it good.